We begin with the budget crisis we inherited. This crisis did not materialize overnight. It originated with Mayor Adams' 2025 November plan. The city's budget at the time was $118.2 billion. That plan projected a $4.7 billion gap in fiscal year 2027 and a $6.3 billion gap over fiscal years 2028 and 2029. We now know that those gaps were significantly understated. To understand the magnitude of what we inherited, the deficit left to us was larger than the gaps left by both Mayor Bloomberg and Mayor de Blasio to their successors.
So do you remember when Mayor Zoran Mamdani did his little press conference where he talked about the crazy budget deficit that was happening, all due to Mayor Eric Adams and former Governor Andrew Cuomo messing up the budget and, of course, withholding funds that New York City is entitled to? And I told you right here, this particular image really told you the truth of everything, because while Mamdani was saying that there was a $5.4 billion deficit, as you can see right here on your screen, he is calling for an increase in spending of $14 billion. And even though I'm not a math wizard, even though, again, I'm not a mathematician, I could see that $14 billion is significantly higher than the $5.4 billion budget deficit. Therefore, the deficit is on this increase in spending right here. Now, of course, all the Mamdani supporters and liars ended up coming out against me saying, no, this is, according to Mamdani, spending that New York City absolutely has to do, but Mayor Eric Adams didn't budget. Therefore, even though Mayor Eric Adams was working with budgets that didn't have this spending in here, it's somehow Eric Adams' fault. Mamdani would never lie to us. He would never backtrack on a key promise. But the thing is, after his stupid ass gambit to raise property taxes ended up backfiring immensely in his face, Mamdani has now done exactly what I said he should do, which is fight back against increases in spending to programs that he previously pretended were preordained by God to be increased in the city of New York.
Mayor Mamdani walking back on a campaign promise and is moving forward with a lawsuit to stop the program from expanding. It would give rental assistance to more people.
And yeah, he did so by backing off a stupid ass campaign promise, which was not to fight a lawsuit that Mayor Eric Adams ended up filing against an increase in spending that New York City couldn't afford. Again, he campaigned on dropping this immediately when he got into office. However, facing a budget deficit and his gambit and his weaponization of property taxes against the state didn't actually end up working. So now Mamdani is following suit, doing exactly what Mayor Eric Adams did, because the program that he's talking about is completely unaffordable. And it was unaffordable then when Adams filed the initial lawsuit, and it's unaffordable now. The thing is, Adams never lied to the public and said that he would keep it in place. He never promised them that this spending would go through no matter what. So now Mamdani has to face down his constituents as he betrays them on a key campaign promise. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay?
Mayor Zoran Mamdani backed off a major campaign promise on affordable housing as the city faces a multi-billion-dollar budget gap. He's now appealing a court order that would force the city to expand its rent voucher program, an expensive plan meant to help low-income New Yorkers pay for housing.
So the program that we're talking about is called City FEPS, which stands for Fighting Homeless and Eviction Prevention Supplement. And the reason Mamdani is appealing it is the same reason Adams did, because it's too expensive. So what this program does, by the way, at the cost of $1.2 billion per year right now, is essentially supplement the rent for people that are homeless or moving off of homelessness by allowing them to get a job and only pay 30% of their income in order to stay in their property. In addition to that, it also hires attorneys for these individuals if they are to be evicted. So again, they could fight back against it. And there is a housing voucher component to that that's a little bit separate from that 30% income thing that I just addressed earlier. Now, of course, the city council decided that they wanted to expand this program from $1.2 billion to around $4.7 billion, even though, again, the city of New York could not afford this, and they didn't really, according to Mayor Eric Adams, have the authority to mandate this because the city council cannot actually pass things that override the budget. So Mayor Eric Adams ended up challenging this in court. He initially won the first round of his case. The city council appealed. The city council won the second round of his case. But of course, New York City, the mayor's office, does have the ability to appeal again, and had Eric Adams stayed in office, he almost certainly would have done so. But Mamdani promised that he wasn't going to do this. He promised that we were going to see this dramatic increase in this particular program that, again, expanded it far beyond homeless people that are moving into apartments from the streets to end up being a much broader housing voucher program and a much broader eviction prevention program. And I want to make something clear to everybody out there in the audience. These housing voucher programs are yet another instance of the city subsidizing demand. And when you subsidize demand, the ultimate response that you will get is higher prices. So yes, this is not actually an affordability policy. It's an unaffordability policy. And in addition to that, this also creates a scenario where if you're a landlord, you definitely don't want to rent to a homeless person being assisted by this program, because the eviction process that we already have in the city of New York is extraordinarily long, bare minimum like 2 years. But this, on top of that, provides additional protections and additional representation to homeless people in order to prevent them from being evicted, thus making the process take years longer, which again drives down vacancy rates, which again reduces supply, which again ends up raising prices. And Mamdani said he was going to ignore all of that. He said we were not going to ever let this program expire. We were going to basically 4x this program as the city council wanted and buck the budget in order to do so. But now that he's actually in the mayor's chair and his little gambit didn't work, he's been forced to backpedal, and it's absolutely hilarious.
Court challenge was begun by Mayor Eric Adams, both mayors saying it's too expensive.
We are speaking about an expansion that would then cost over $4 billion in the next few years alone. I am deeply committed to ending the homelessness crisis in the city, and also I'm committed to doing so in a manner that is sustainable for both the medium and the long term.
You gotta love this right here, Mayor Mamdani being forced to repeat the same exact talking points of Eric Adams, because of course they're going to appeal the case started by Mayor Eric Adams, and thus he cannot contradict it as the mayor now that he's in office, because it could end up hurting his case. But yeah, it's actually 100% right. The city can't afford this. And in addition to that, I want you guys to understand what else the city council tried to take away, because if you guys will recall, I told you that you would get a voucher where essentially you would pay 30% of your income in order to rent a place. The city would cover the rest of your rent if you were in this program. But the thing that the city council wanted to do away with, and again, tell me if this makes any sense at all whatsoever to you guys out there in the audience, is in fact the work requirement for the individuals in this program. So essentially, one of the things that Mayor Eric Adams wanted to preserve was this idea that if you're only going to pay 30% of your income in rent, then you should be required to work X amount of hours, because again, if you're keeping your income down to lower your rent, that ends up costing the city more money. But of course, the woke members of the city council were 100% against that, and they try to strip away those requirements. And that's one of the reasons why that the program went from an already expensive $1.2 billion to $4.7 billion in the budget, and why it's completely unsustainable. And it's hilarious to see Mamdani, of all people, say unsustainable, because he's a communist, because he's somebody who campaigned on an exorbitant amount of unsustainable spending. But yeah, it's just funny because now that he's in the chair, now that he actually can't do these things because of the budget controls that were put into law back in the 70s when the city went broke, Mamdani is up you-know-what creek without a paddle.
Mayor says conversations about the voucher program are ongoing, but after working to cut the city's $12 billion deficit he says he inherited down to $5.4 billion, he's trying not to raise property taxes.
The property tax has always been something that we did not want to pursue. We laid it clearly that this was a last resort.
Now, what also hurts Mamdani, of course, is his proposed tax increases, which were an increase in property tax, and a significant one, a 9% increase, the increase in the death tax, and by the way, the lowering of the threshold of the death tax to $750,000. And by the way, New York City doesn't do this tax in terms of a marginal rate. They actually have what is called a cliff, which means if you hit a certain point, all of your money going back is actually taxed at that 50% rate if this were to pass, which is what Mamdani wanted to do. And I believe that rate is 5% over the threshold. So I think if you get around $775,000, that is where they're going to tax all of your money backdated. And remember, if you bought a home in an outer borough in like the 1990s or the 2000s for maybe $1 to $2 to even $300,000, it could be worth over $1 million at this point. So all these different tax proposals ended up creating such a backlash, according to the city councilors, and it shocked the Mamdani administration that they had to withdraw. In addition to that, he also tried to basically provoke Kathy Hochul, essentially try to force her into raising the state income tax and state corporate tax, which Hochul does not want to raise, at least in an election year. And instead of taking this as the push that inspired her to become more progressive, Hochul saw this for what it was, which is Mamdani trying to leverage his perceived popularity in order to attack her, and that completely backfired, as essentially he's been frozen out by state negotiations and frozen out of influence in the budget process because Hochul is not trying to play this game. So Mamdani has to back off of all this spending, because not only is he not going to get his statewide tax increases on income and of course on corporations, it doesn't look like the city council is willing to pass the local tax increases, at least not all of them, that Mamdani is saying that they need as the leverage point, as the trigger action if the state doesn't act.
Some say the mayor is backtracking on a campaign promise to support the expansion of this housing voucher program. Others say this is what happens when a mayor who may have run on an idealistic platform comes up against the cold, hard fiscal reality of the city's budget and deficit.
So yeah, this is what we call a total defeat and humiliation of Zohran Mamdani, and I'm 100% here for it. But of course, I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Do you think Mamdani supporters will actually turn on him based on the fact that he went back on a key campaign promise and is doing exactly what Mayor Eric Adams was doing and he promised that he wouldn't? Or do you think, like many of things, these people just support Mamdani because they love the idea of a third world Muslim doing performative third worldisms while saying that he's a communist? And in terms of actual policy, that's not something they were ever really concerned with, because they're in for the anti-American, anti-Western vibes, and he still provides that to the absolute maximum. Again, let me know all your thoughts down in the comments below. As per usual, if you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Mamdani being an absolute idiot. Till next time.